Thank you for tuning in to the Elevated Podcast and taking the time to nourish your roots and elevate your soul. Let's get into it. We have so much to talk about today. I don't think you understand. We have so much to talk about today. I am talking to you on July 6th, and hopefully this is going to come out on July 6th. Last night, the Threads launched, and I didn't know about this. I didn't know it was coming. Other people did. I was out of the loop, believe it or not, as someone who just got her master's degree in tech law. I was out of the loop. I didn't know this whole Threads thing was coming, but Niaz, it's all Niaz's fault. She told me about this Threads, and last night I had a ball. I was so happy. Let me tell you something. I have been saying in my head for months now that there's a new social media app coming. There has to be, because a new one comes around every 3 years or so. And it kind of almost takes the place of something new. And like all of the social media apps as they are now are there's something missing. And what I have found that there's like a degree of authenticity that's missing from all of them right now, because there's this like intention of we have to like produce really high quality content on any of these platforms to be successful. And for most people, that's not really feasible. It's not feasible for me. I don't have the equipment. As much as you think this is a high quality product, I mean, I don't have the equipment to produce a Mr. Beast type video. So when this came on, I was like so excited because it brings this like level of authenticity that I think has been missing from so many social media platforms. And like Be Real had the intention there, but I still think there was this inclination for people to still act like that they were doing something at the time the Be Real ping came up. Like, I still have to act like I'm doing something cool now. So it like had the right intention, but it kind of missed the mark on the execution. Anyways, I'm going into this like long spiel about Threads because I'm so excited. I like went off last night. If you don't follow me on there, go follow me. I'm going to be so funny. And like, I'm going to say what I feel, which was like so liberating. The fact of the matter is there's no ads yet. There aren't people like telling you how to live your life better all the time, like on TikTok. Our aunts and our uncles aren't on there stalking us. It's really like a safe space right now, and I really hope we don't all ruin it, but it's really fun on there. And I told myself the next social media app that comes along, I'm jumping on it right away because I know that it's going to be the next thing. And here it is. So I was up last night. I got so wired. I was like giggling at everything that people were posting. And I also like am getting over a cold. I've been sick for 8 days and I still have this cough. So I was up till like 2 a.m., which is ridiculous, but I'm like riding the high still. And I recorded a podcast episode earlier today with Shubi, which is coming out soon. And she's like, she just got her degree, or master's degree in tech policy. And she was really interesting. She taught us all about the Indian election in 2024 and how that's going to affect the US-India relationship and how it's going to affect tech policy. And she talks about trust and safety protocols. So fascinating. I can't wait for you to listen to it. So before I launched that episode, I really wanted to come on here and just like give you an update on how things are, like what's going on. I feel like we haven't sat down and just like, we need to be silly. We need to have a silly episode where I'm just like talking to you about what's going on, because I mean, like there's a lot, but there's also nothing happening. And I just really wanted to like have a conversation that was a little bit less education-y and a little more silly, if you catch my drift. So I have my little notes app in my phone because I wrote some notes and I don't want to forget anything that I wanted to talk about. man, I have been sick for 8 days, like I said. I really feel like it's a big purging of a lot of crap, of like beliefs about myself and my business and my future job that aren't serving me anymore. It's a big purging of like, I need to rest. Like, I've really been honoring the rest lately because I've had to. There's no option. And it's just been a really interesting time. I went back to journaling, believe it or not. And I went back to meditating, believe it or not. Like, that's how that's how bad it got. But I have felt the call to just do those things that make me feel a little bit better, that need to get the energy out of me as opposed to holding it all in. So there were a lot of things that came up, and it was a lot of like, why am I not over these things by now? Past relationships, past friendships, things that just have not gone right. And I've been like, why am I not over these things? It's been years, or like, there's no timeline on this stuff. And especially because I was sick and like on medication, I think I was feeling like extra down about certain things. And it was this invitation to revisit some of that stuff because I have to. There's no other choice. I have to forgive myself for things in the past and move forward. There's no other choice. And it's something I'm working on. And I just felt it like really heavily come up because I was having all these like weird dreams when I was sick and just like stuff that I feel like I should be over. So I don't know if anyone else needs to hear that right now, but it's just like, there's no timeline on the healing process. It could be years. And especially if you're someone who's empathetic, who loves deeply, like those emotions are always going to be there. I feel like I've said this before, but the emotion of love, like the energy of love, is infinite. So if you've ever loved somebody in the past, that love doesn't really ever go away, in my opinion. It shifts and it changes and it doesn't look the same way on planet Earth, but like the energy is still there. So additionally, what else has been coming up since I've been sick is like, I was writing down all these beliefs about myself that just like weren't helping, weren't serving me anymore and where I wanted to go. One of them was like all the things that I felt when I was starting my business. And if you're thinking about starting your own business, if you just are thinking about starting a social media platform, if you are just interested in speaking more online, you might have similar feelings of like, what if I'm too cringy? Or what if no one cares what I say? What if people are going to judge me if they do care what I say? Like, you're never going to win that battle. You're never going to please everybody. You're never going to like be perfect in everybody's eyes. So you might as well just start saying what you want to say. And I was actually speaking to a client about this, and she said like, I don't feel like I'm good at social media. And I was like, I don't think I'm good at social media at all. Like, I don't have the really high production quality content that other people do. But other people think that I am good at social media, which is crazy. I don't think I am. I think I just like do what feels right in the moment, and it's not always successful. And you have to get the idea that there's one way to do social media, you need to get that out of your head. Or if there's one way to do a business or conduct a business, you need to get that out of your head. Which is always so interesting to me, like if people go get a business degree or an MBA, like there is no one way of doing all of that. There are good practices to implement, but like there's no one way of doing it. I learned a lot of the stuff on my own, and it was like some trial and error and some consulting different people about the same thing and then deciding what worked best for me. So going back to these feelings like, what if no one cares what I say, or what if I'm cringy or like all these things. You're never going to win that. And so you might as well just say, it's not always going to work for everybody. And every time I get like one person saying, you actually like, I love your podcast or it's so good. It's like, I'm like, wow, really? It's so crazy. And I've been doing this for 2 years, this podcast, over 2 years. And I still like run into this of like, do I really want to talk about that on the podcast? Or should I say this? Or I always run into that, even though I think that it's something that I've gotten past, because when I was starting the podcast, like that was a huge hurdle to get over. It's like, what if no one cares? What if people listen to it? What if no one listens to it? It's like, you're never going to win with yourself. I even run into this now. It's like, I think I've explained this to a lot of people. It's like when people in my real life tell me that they listen to my podcast, I'm like, oh no. Why did you listen to it? But like, I don't care if strangers listen to it, but if people I actually know in the real world are listening to me talk about what I talk about, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, which is so funny. It's just funny that I still run into that sometimes. I still have hurdles where I'm like, I need to kind of get through that feeling of what if no one cares, or what if it's silly, or what if it's cringy, or blah, blah, blah. I say, just start doing it. Take that little leap. Do that one social media post. And I when I was talking to my client about like her not feeling she was good at social media, I was like, no one's going to listen or watch your first post. Like, no one's going to listen to your first episode. I mean, people are going to go back. Yeah, sure. But it's not going to be something that people go back to very often. If you go back to my first episode, like, you can hear the little static in the background. I don't have an intro. It's just doesn't sound as nice. And I don't even know what it sounds like from my voice and how that's changed over time. But you have to start somewhere, and you can look back. I could have looked back on the past 2 years and said, I produced no podcasts, or I can look back on the last 2 years and say, I produced 70 plus podcast episodes. So that was just something that I was running into, of like, just feeling stuck with my business and what I wanted to talk about. Another thing that was coming up is like, lately I've been finding I want to talk more about tech policy, because it's what I studied and it's really interesting to me. And I have been talking about it a little bit on this podcast, but not as much as like dating and sex. And I think dating and sex are what a lot of my audience is drawn to. But I wanted to talk about both. And I wanted to talk about more things that I was interested in that had nothing to do with it. But I was like, what if it doesn't fit into one of my pillars? Or what if it doesn't fit into this podcast? And I had to start looking at that, because I love when people are multifaceted and like a ton of different things. I love that about myself, and I love that about other people. And I notice that in other people, and it's what draws me to them, is the fact that they like so many different things. It's the manifesting generators in all of us. So I was like, I have to start embracing that about myself if that's what I like in other people. And that's something for you too. If there's something that you see in this podcast or anything else that you listen to or consume that you like, there's a reason why you like it. And it's something that you probably like within yourself that maybe hasn't been tapped into yet. Or if it has, you could tap into it more. I have the funniest, like, just what's happening in the porn world update that I think we need to talk about, because I am your porn news guru. I hope I'm your porn news guru. I hope I'm the one that's giving you all of this wealth of information about what's happening in the porn world. And if you don't know, let me tell you. But if you do know, you're going to think this is funny that I'm bringing this up. But I think that the most crazy thing that happened last week was the fact that Lena the Plug finally did a scene with another man. Okay, let me break this down for you. I think I've talked about her on the podcast before. Lena the Plug and Adam 22, they're a couple. They do a podcast where they interview a female porn star and then they have sex with her afterwards. And so they have like the first interview on YouTube and they put clips on everywhere on the internet. And then they have the OnlyFans for the second half of the podcast. And they have a threesome with her. It's a thing. They've made millions of dollars off of this idea. I mean, it is genius. So the two of them have been in somewhat of like a quote unquote open relationship, but like they're married now, and primarily their open relationship pertains to like what they do for work. And they've always hooked up with other women, and Lena has never hooked up with another man ever since they've been together. And they just got married. They have a little girl who's the cutest baby in the world. They have a dog together. They have like a whole family. But Lena just announced that she finally did a scene with another man, which is big news in the world, in this porn world. And it's really interesting to like, I watched a clip of Adam 22 talking about it. And he was like, she gave me so many outs. She asked me like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And he was like, yeah, I totally agreed to it. And then after it happened, there was a little like ping in my stomach, like, ooh, which I thought was so interesting because they're such an open couple. They're very progressive, if that's the word you want to label it as. But it was interesting that he like felt a certain way that she did a scene with another man. This man is like very well known in the porn world. He's like a big porn male actor. And so the scene hasn't come out yet. Maybe if I watch it, I'll let you guys know. But like, just like an educational standpoint, I don't really watch a whole lot of porn, believe it or not. But I just thought it was so interesting, and like it's a big development in the porn world. So that's your porn news for the week. I love how I said I was like honoring rest, and then I was like, I'm having a coughing fit, and I'm like, I can't stop this podcast. We're on a roll. The show's got to go on. Okay, sex and dating. There were a couple things that have been coming up because I've been talking a lot about how sex is kind of integrated into so many other aspects of my life: education, conversations, my podcast, my work. It's pretty much everywhere in my life except for the bedroom. And it's so interesting because I think a large majority of other people operate oppositely. It's in the bedroom and like very few other places in their lives. And so I was talking to a lot of like men in my life about this, like friends, male friends. And because let me give you context, because I went on a date kind of recently, just like a date, whatever, first date, not really worth telling you about, but I started explaining a little bit about what I talk on the podcast and about what I talked about in my master's program. And I was like, yeah, I have this like tendency to hyper intellectualize kind of silly topics. And he was like, he kind of like made fun of it a little bit. Like, oh yeah, like he would like make a comment, like a sexual comment, and be like, no, but like intellectually. I'm like, okay, you don't get it. You don't get it. And I can't explain it to you. Like, he was young, you could tell he was really young and just didn't. It would be one thing if you were young and had a lot of life experience. They were just not, he didn't quite understand where I was coming from, which is fine. I think it's a little bit more difficult to find men who can understand that there's like a separation between the art and the artist with me. Like, there's a separation between what I talk about and how I actually am behind closed doors, which is very prudy lately and very like reserved and not very outgoing in that way. So I was talking to my two guy friends about this, and I was like, because when I told my mom about this date and how I felt about it. And I was like, yeah, I just didn't quite get it. And she was like, well, maybe it might be hard to find men who do get that. And I was saying to my guy friends, I was like, I have two examples sitting in front of me of two men who have respected what I talk about and not sexualized me because of it. And there's like a separation there. So it's interesting. Like, I am so quick to pick up on when a man can't make that differentiation. And I understand that there's like a tendency to blend them together because it's what I'm leading with a lot of the time. And I was talking to my friend Katie, who's been on this podcast. We were talking like, do you save that for later on in the dating process? And I'm like, no, because it's a really great way for me to weed out people who probably aren't going to be right for me if they think that because I talk about sex online that I'm a sexual person all the time. And so, I mean, I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's like it comes to light in so many different ways and so many different scenarios that I think is just an interesting way to look at it. So like for the people who kind of are operating sexually behind closed doors more often than I am, it's an interesting thing. Like what parts of our lives should we bring sex into? Which is something I was talking to somebody in my DMs about. What parts of our lives should we bring our sexual energy to? And I think it's an interesting question because to me, sexual energy is also tied to our confidence and how we show up in the world. And discovering our sexuality, it's like when I was going through my kind of like sexual awakening just on my own after my breakup, it was like I was tapping into this aspect of me that had been kind of dormant for a long time. I was not as well versed in things that I liked or things that I wanted. And when I started tuning into that, it was like I was getting super clear about what I wanted, how I wanted it, who I wanted it with. I was being a little bit more protective of who came into my space. And it translated into more confidence just in the world because you were able to say no to things that you didn't like. You were able to understand how to say yes to things that you did like. You were able to tune into your body because your body is always speaking to you. And so it like blends into other aspects of our lives. So it's like taking your sexual energy to like your workplace sounds weird, but like it's not sexual energy as much as it is your confidence in your body and how you show up in the world and how you articulate what you want and who you are. So I think it's like, it's just a unique way of going about how to show up in the world in a better way and how you want to is really rediscovering who you are from a sexual standpoint. Because it's like the one area of our lives that we tend to not put a whole lot of focus on or like a lot of self-work and self-development on. And until we do, there's this like whole area of our lives that we don't tap into until you start listening to my podcast, or you start discovering that it's like just as important as our mental health or our physical health. And your sexual health doesn't have to be about having sex with other people, of course, or having sex with yourself necessarily. It's just like a sexual energy. It's how you connect to yourself and how you connect to your body. And I have a really great like $5 course that is available on my page in the description below. If you're interested in tapping into this, like it's a great way to just reconnect with that part of yourself. And so I have been finding that I actually need to revisit some of this stuff because I am so outwardly facing sexual in a way that's like more educational and more just like what I talk about. Then when it came to me actually doing the stuff behind closed doors, I get so nervous. And I have been feeling like such a prude. Like I don't want to do anything. I feel so nervous. I feel like such a little prude, but I'm like all talk, which is like, I've kind of always been like that, but it's funny to see it happening now lately because I'm like, I know what I want. I know how to say no. I know how to tell people things. And it's like, sometimes you don't still. And sometimes those nerves like come up, and it's not nerves like I don't want to do this. It's just like nerves that I think I have to be a certain way because I'm so publicly facing a certain way. And I know so much about sex. And then when I am presented with the opportunity to conduct those things, it's like, oh, maybe I didn't know entirely what I was talking about. And maybe there's like a certain performative aspect or like pressure that I put on myself. But like it was such an interesting thing to revisit that lately. And yeah, I was just like, whoa, how interesting. And kudos to the person that was in the moment with me. Like, what can I do to make you feel more comfortable? I'm like, nothing. It's just me. It's just what's going on with me. Like, I know that it is. And it's just something we gotta like move through. It's just so interesting. So like, I'm no expert by any means. And I don't think there is such a thing as an expert because each person that you're going to interact with is so different, and they're all going to have different likes and dislikes. And so it's like, how can I approach each sexual experience I have with like a totally like first day mentality? Like, this is the first day I'm here at a new job, and how can I learn something new about this person? And you can even do that even 10 years into a relationship. Like, that day might be different from the past 10 years of what that person likes and what that person needs in that moment. But yeah, the first date, two different people, by the way. I would never go on a first date with somebody I didn't really like and then have sex with them. That's not what I do anymore. It's so interesting because he was like, you could tell he was like kind of into me, and I was like not feeling it because it just like wasn't compatible at all. And he told me that he like wanted a friends with benefits situation. I was like, okay, like, not with me, you don't. And at the end he was like, can I kiss you? I was like, maybe next time. And my guy friend was so taken aback that I said no. He was like, you said no? I was like, yes, of course I said no. And so it's just like, it feels really good to be able to set your boundaries when you might not have before. And he was just like, so I think he was like hurting for himself anytime he felt rejected. It was so funny. I go back and forth on the apps. I'll never know how I feel about them. I hear from so many people these success stories, and it's like, shut up. Someone was telling me like, yeah, I met my wife on there. I'm like, stop talking. What are you talking about? Maybe people are listening have had a lot of success in there. Kudos to you. Kudos to you. It's just not my experience yet. So yeah, I think this whole experience has kind of taught me like, what am I afraid of experiencing in both dating and just sex in general. There's maybe a little bit of resistance to it because of so many things that it's like reasonable to feel resistant about, but I have to take it one step at a time. And I feel like those experiences that aren't our favorites like still teach us something. So much to catch up on. We talked about Threads, we talked about the podcast, we talked about social media, we talked about sex and dating. I was gonna talk a little bit about like the recent Supreme Court decisions that came out, but I think we'll save that for another episode because I honestly have not read them yet. And I would hate to be your source of news on something that I didn't do research about. Can you believe what a concept? Doing research before you report it in the news. No one does that anymore. Me calling out everybody on TikTok, pretty much. So yeah, those are just some musings I've had lately. Thank you for listening. Happy Thread Day. Yesterday was Thread Day. Happy second day of Threads. And I really hope you go on there and at least follow me at the Elevate Path, as obviously, and just chat. Let's just talk. I feel like I'm so better at like articulating my thoughts in like, I don't know, just like a low quality production, just like words, just sentences, just things what I'm thinking. Instead of like this pressure on TikTok and Instagram to like do really highly produced content that like feels like more people are going to see it. And I don't know. It's just an interesting difference. And I'm excited about this one. So I think that's it for now, Elevation Nation. Thank you all for listening. And I would love to hear from you if you have any suggestions or thoughts about this podcast or things that you want me to talk about next. If there's anything that I talked about in here that you want me to go in depth on, I would love to hear from you. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you feel so elevated. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram and Threads at The Elevated Empath. Don't forget to subscribe and follow this podcast. Rate it 5 stars, write a review, do all those things. And let me know what you think about this episode, what you'd like me to talk about next. And I hope you feel so elevated. And I will see you next time.